On this week's video, we say goodbye to an old friend of ours, one that really was there for us in the strong edits, allowed us to reach new heights in editing, and really gave us a chance to push our edits to the next level. You know what I'm talking about. We're talking about split toning. And with the recent Lightroom edit, split toning is no more. So I'd like to bow our heads in silence and pay respects for just a moment. All right, that is enough of that, because with the removal of split toning, they actually gave us a better tool called color grading. And in this video, we are gonna go over what color grading is, how to use it, and how you can really game change your photos, because this tool, it is awesome. Will Simpson here, and welcome to Exploring Photography. Today we are going over the new color grading tool in Lightroom. Now this replaced split toning, so you can still split tone, but it came with some new features that allows you to do even more adjustments and more edits, and it's a much more powerful tool. Plus, I'm not sure if this was on your phone. I can't remember if split toning was on your phone or not, so let me know in the comments if you remember. But color grading is now on your phone. So we will go over that a little bit later in the video, but let's jump right into Lightroom and get started. In Lightroom, the first thing you're gonna notice is on the right-hand side that split toning is now gone. It is officially replaced by color grading. So let's go ahead and open color grading, and what do we see? Well, we see three wheels with a bunch of colors. We see some sliders, we see some other sliders down here, and we see a couple of eyes. At first you might be wondering, well, it's quite a bit different than split toning, and it is, but it's super simple. So first, you notice the picture I have here. We have true black on the left and true white on the right, with everything in between. Those grays in the middle are our midtones, and then we have our shadows here and our highlights here. Let's go ahead and adjust the shadows. Let's add a color to the shadows. So you can click this wheel in here and you can move it all the way around. The farther you go out to the edge, the more saturation you put in. So let's go ahead and put 100% saturation in green. Now for the highlights, let's put a really big contrast color. Let's go ahead and put red. We're gonna drag this all the way over here. Let's get a deep red as we can get. Okay, that looks fine. And then for the midtones, let's add a middle color. Let's go ahead and add like a blue. So you can see here, you have true black on the far left. You still have true white on the far right, but you have your greens in the shadows. You have your bluish, purplish in the middle, and you have your pinkish red in the far right. Now this shows you where the colors are put. And in a picture, this is gonna be a little bit harder to detect, but this is just so you can really clearly see what it's doing. The sliders underneath the wheels, these are the luminance sliders for the midtone shadows or highlights. So if I move the midtone slider all the way to the left, it darkens the blues. If I do the same thing with the shadows, it darkens the greens, even creates more blacks. And if I do it with the highlights, it darkens the reds or the pinks in this case, even adding them to the true whites. If I go the reverse, it creates more of a blowout. Same thing with the shadows, makes them brighter, makes the true blacks even more green, and makes the midtones more of a light, pale purplish, lavender maybe. If you want to reset that, simply double click on the slider and it resets it to 0 or to the middle range. Now these little eyes here turn on and off. Now you can't click it, you have to click and hold it, and it'll show you what it looks like without it. Personally, I don't like this 3-wheel setup. I feel it's a little bit too far away. You'll notice that there's 3 dots here. That's what we're selecting now. That shows all 3, the highlights, the shadows, and the midtones. And then there's these 3 individual ones. You can kind of guess the dark one is shadows, the gray one is midtones, and the white one is highlights. Now let's click the shadows and see what we got. So in this one, you can see that you have a full circle. You have a much bigger circle, so you can kind of pick your color. Let's go ahead and reset this by double clicking. So now there's no color in the shadow. And what you can do is you can click this circle and then you can find your color. The closer you are to center, the less the saturation. The farther you are away from center or closer to the edge, the more saturation. So all the way to the edge is 100% saturation. All the way to the middle is 0% saturation. And if you look down here to the middle left, you can see that the hue and saturation is here. Now again, that's not as precise as you can be. If you click this little arrow here, you can actually adjust the hue with a slider, which I personally find much more simple, much easier to dial in and get exactly the right color that you want. You can also adjust the saturation to exactly what you want. A cool little thing, let's say I want this to be on green and I want this to be mid-saturation, or green, let's just put this here, green and mid saturation, okay? So if you go up here to the circle and if you press shift and click the circle, you notice that little line, you can greatly adjust precision on that line. So if I move left and right, it doesn't move off the line, but up and down, I can adjust the saturation. So that's kind of cool. I don't really use that much. It's just a feature that you should know about. So let's go down here and let's take the hue and let's adjust it to a green and let's put 100% saturation. Then you can adjust the luminance here. So luminance darker, brighter, however you want. And again, the circle here to see it on and off. The next thing is the blending and balance. These are global. So these are really important to understand because it affects how the colors blend together. Balance you had in split toning. Balance was how much priority did the colors give to shadows or highlights. For example, if you wanted priority shadows, then majority of your shadow color would cover most of the image, and if you wanted majority highlights, majority of your image would be colored with the color you did for the highlights. So let's give an example here. Let's go ahead and clear out the midtones, and let's do highlights. Let's do red here, and let's just darken it up so we can really see. Okay, so balance. So if I go all the way to the right, you see how the balance is primarily in the highlights. So it's gonna make all the colors from basically shadows to highlights or pure white be the highlight color. If I go full left, it's gonna do the opposite. So it's gonna do priority shadows. I primarily leave this slider in the middle, so you double click on it and it resets it because I get an even balance of highlights to shadows. That way I get that contrast that I'm going for. Now right here, without midtones, it's considered split toning. So you have that feature, but now added, you have the blending and you have the midtones, which makes it a little bit more powerful. Let's go into the blending slider. The blending slider is how the feather is a great word to describe it. It's the feathering of the colors together. For example, if you go all the way to the left, it's 0. So the feather is 0. Notice how the shadows are green up into the midtones, and then the highlights are pink up into the midtones. There's no blend. It's cut right there at the 0, none, 0 blending, no colors, nothing. So if we go all the way to the right, we'll notice that we get almost an orangey color because you mix pink and green, you get this little orangey, yellowy color. So that tells you that it's blending the colors more. Again, this is pretty much image specific, so you're gonna have more or less blending depending. You could leave this alone, but it's a really powerful tool. If we then add some midtones to this, let's add some blue, and let's darken them with the luminance. So now we have 3 colors. So let's see what happens when we do the blending all the way to the left. This is no blend. This is full cut lines. So you can see a little blend here where the shadows meet the midtones and where the highlights meet the midtones. But they're pretty clear lines, so you can see that they're cut and dry. Now, if we go to the right, now we kind of lose the midtones altogether and we get this kind of like yucky mud color-ish nastiness in the middle. So that's no good. So we wouldn't want to do that unless your image you kind of want to do that. However, we're just going to leave this in the middle now so you understand exactly what they do. The last thing with regards to this is this final circle here. This is a global adjustment. So you have the shadows, adjust the shadows. You have the midtones, adjust the midtones. You have the highlights, adjust the highlights. This one, despite the other 3, puts a blanket on top of all of them. So if this image needed warming up all around, we could simply add some orange. Let's go ahead and put that there. And let's adjust this, let's put the saturation all the way. So you see it completely changes the colors. Now we have this like army green, orangey, weird color. You know, it doesn't look good. Obviously this is an example to show you what it does. If we lower the saturation, you notice it goes away and comes back to the primary colors that we had. But again, it's gonna be image specific. So it's not gonna look good on a blanket example like this, but on an image that might need a little warming up or a little juicing up, this might work perfectly. The last thing I want to show you is the reset button. Down here, this resets the entire image, all the edits you've ever made. However, if you press Option on your keyboard, Alt or Option on a Mac, you'll notice that this says Reset Global, let go of Option, it says Global, Reset Global, Reset. So you can reset the global by just clicking that and resets them to default settings. Go to Highlights, you can reset them, you can go to Midtones, reset them. Or you can press Option and click the reset button here, which resets all of them. So you don't have to reset everything. If you just didn't like what you were doing and you want to start fresh, just press Alt or Option and click that reset button, and boom, factory settings done for color grading, not your whole image, so you don't lose all that. Before we go on, I wanted to ask you, if this video is helping you out, please hit the subscribe button down below, or I think there's a button down here in this corner. It could be in this corner. I'm kind of backwards. I'm not sure. I'll know after editing this video which one it's in. But hit the subscribe button. I do videos like this every Monday at 7 p.m. and it also really helps me. Hit the like button and hit the bell so you're notified when a new video comes up. But let's go on to the next example, which is a live example so you can see this in action. All right, here we are with this image that I took in Oregon at the Devil's Punch Bowl. This whole thing, it's the coolest thing. This whole thing fills up with water, and if you catch it at low tide, you get this really cool dome effect. Now, I really like this image. I've already done an edit on it, and I really like it. I think it turns out really good. It has a great mood. But with color grading alone, we can make it a little bit better. So the first thing we're gonna do is I'm going to be using the shadows. I'm gonna be using the individual sliders first. The first thing we're gonna do is add a little bit of coolness to the shadows. I'm a big fan of using coolness in shadows and warmness in highlights. It really creates a really nice contrast. So I'm gonna use the hue sliders. I'm not gonna use the wheel here. I just find the hue sliders work a little bit better. Remember that little arrow right here to toggle them is right there in the right corner. So we're gonna go here, we're gonna add a little coolness. I think we're gonna add about one, I think that one's good. And we're just gonna add a little bit of saturation to it. That should be good. And then we're gonna darken it because I want my shadows to be a little bit darker. So we're gonna darken them down a little. I think that works. Now, here's the before, after, before, after. Now you already see a huge difference, and that was just simply adjusting the shadows. Now let's do the highlights next, because I like to do the shadows first, the highlights second, and then the midtones to kind of balance them out. So let's go into the highlights, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna add some warmth into this. Let's see, we want it to be about there, looks good, and then let's just add a smidge of saturation. I don't wanna make it too much, because too much makes it look like crap. Yeah, that's too much, that's too much. I think just a smidge. The thing about this tool is it's extremely powerful. You can greatly destroy your image or make your image that much better by doing this too much or too little or just right. So when you're doing this, when you're working with the color grading, do it in small increments. Little is better because you can always add more. Obviously, it's digital, so you can remove it if you do too much. However, it's small tweaks. Small tweaks make big differences once layered and stacked on top. This is with a lot of editing. It's actually probably one of the best pieces of advice you'll get in editing photos is baby steps. Do little bits at a time, let them stack on top of each other, because if you do too much, it's hard to go back and undo what you did because sometimes it gets lost in editing. All right, so a little bit of saturation. And then I want to brighten up the highlights. So we are going to raise the luminance for the highlights to, I think we're going to do 50. Okay, good. And here's the before. A little bit better. Notice how it just kind of brightens up this left part here. A little bit better, adds a little bit more contrast. And let's balance it out with the mid-tones. And I want to add a little bit more warmth to the image. And so we're going to do 20. And the saturation, we're going to do a little bit more saturation since there's less midtones. I think that looks good. And we're not going to adjust the luminance at all. So before, after. Yeah, that kind of balances, that blends the shadows in with the highlights a little bit better, so it doesn't look as a stark contrast. It's more of a smooth transition. And finally, we're going to adjust the blending. Now this is a powerful tool. It's the new one that they added when they added color grading and they added the midtones. You didn't have blending before. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna blend it. We're gonna blend it more to the highlights. So I'm gonna raise this, and again, just a smidge to 57. So it's a little bit higher on the midtones. So just a little push, because blending, I want it to be a really smooth transition. So here's the cool thing. Let's go to the little toggle switch up here on the left corner of color grading. And if we click it off, there's the before and there's the after. Unbelievable. Just with color grading, we were able to create such a better image. I mean, this looks kind of dull. It's a great image, it's a great edit, but it's kind of dull. So with color grading, we made it smoking. We made it pop. It's crispy, it's blended, and ooh, and it's, I like it. Needs a little bit more work, but that alone, beautiful. A cool way to practice this feature is I'm doing a photo editing contest where you guys get to edit my photos. As of today, it's Monday. I think there's a week left in the competition, but go to my Instagram. It's right here. Will's been here. And on my highlight, on my first highlight, is all the information on the photo contest, and you get to edit my photos. There's some great prizes. Go check me out on Instagram and enter that competition, and you can practice your color grading. All right, with that being said, let's go on to portraits, because color grading makes a big difference with portraits. You can really bring out or adjust or make your portraits really pop. So let's go into here, and I'll show you an example of a portrait of me, actually. Ah! Oh my gosh. Okay, not that one. We'll move on. That was, well, you gotta have fun during photo shoots. All right, here is a portrait of me. Who is that good looking guy? Well, that's this guy. Doesn't look as good here, but looks good there. Anyways, we're gonna make this change. This is a great photo. It looks good. Doesn't really need anything. I could use it as is, but for this demonstration purposes, we are going to show you how this works with portraiture. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go into the shadows here, and we are going to add some coolness to the shadows. So let's slide this over to here. Let's get to the teal. I think 215 looks good. And then we're gonna add a saturation of maybe about 40. Not a lot of saturation, but just a little. And you can already see the photo changing. Oh my gosh, that looks, I mean, immediately that looks great. So look at this, before, after, before, after. I mean, that made a huge difference just by doing that. We could probably lower the saturation just a shade. I'm gonna go down to 30. I think that looks better. The good thing about color grading is it really gives you control on adjusting skin tones, because now you have that mid-tone slider and you can adjust them specifically, because that's kind of where skin tones lie, is in the mid-tone range. So split toning before, you couldn't really adjust the mid-tones, but in color grading with the new mid-tones, you can absolutely adjust them, and it's incredible. All right, so we're gonna go to highlights now, because again, shadows first, highlights second, and we are going to add a little bit of warmth, because highlights, your skin generally reflects the warmth, the light. So if we're using a warm light, we want a warm show. Again, it all comes down to style and what you're going for editing. But for this purposes, we're gonna add some warmth. So let's go ahead and slide it up to just about the oranges, good. And we're gonna add a smidge of saturation, because we're gonna do most of the work in highlight or in midtones. So that's good. Before, after, just a little warmth, not too much, not too little. All right, so with the midtones, we're gonna add, let's see what we wanna add. We're gonna just up the saturation here so we can see what we wanna do. Yeah, let's go ahead and add some more warmth. I'm thinking maybe around 15 again, and we're gonna lower the saturation a little to really get that. Oh, we don't even need that much, because that looks good. Okay, good. I think that looks perfect. The next thing we're gonna do is go down to the blending, and again, we're gonna make it a little bit sharper of a blend. I want more of a clear cut between the lines, because the shadows and highlights are so different. So we're gonna lower this. I think let's go to a 29. Yeah, that looks good. And then our balance, we're gonna go heavy on the highlights. So we're gonna up this to about, I think 20. Okay, good. I think that's looking amazing. Yeah, okay, so let's look at the before and the after. Before, after. I mean, just with a few tweaks, we have made this portrait that much better. I mean, it looks, look at that. Before, after. Okay, so we got this perfected, right? So let's go into global, and let's go ahead and add some coolness. Let's make this a really cool photo. Cool as in temperature, not cool as in cool guy. But that is a cool guy. Anyways, let's raise the saturation here. And you notice, now the image is cool, but with a few tweaks, let's now make it a warm photo. Oh, look at that, warm photo. So you can adjust everything and make it, let's go ahead and reset this real quick. So you can adjust everything, make it perfect, and then you can style it. So I can't get over how powerful this tool is. It just makes a huge, huge difference. And finally, let's jump into the phone. Because on the phone, you can do so many things now that you have color grading. It allows you to be able to do things like this. So let's get into Lightroom Mobile, and we're gonna open up this little horsey photo here, go into light, and then not light, we're gonna go into color. I don't remember if there was split toning. I cannot for the life of me remember if there was split toning in Lightroom Mobile. I don't believe there was, so this is huge. So let's go into color grading here, and we're gonna see the exact same setup. So everything that applied there applies here. Okay, let's see. We're gonna add some coolness in the shadows. And just go down here to the coolness, good. And raise the saturation. We don't want to put too much saturation, just a little bit. Let's go to the midtones. Actually, let's go to the highlights first because, you know, I got a stick standard and I want to go a little bit more coolness in the highlights. And the saturation, we're gonna just bump it up to literally almost nothing. That looks good. And then we're gonna go into the midtones, and this is where we're gonna warm the baby up. Yeah, let's go there to 23. Good, and raise the saturation. There it is. Oh yeah. Okay, looking good. Good. And after that, we're gonna go into blending down here, and we're gonna just raise the blending so it's a little bit smoother transition. A little bit more. Good. And finally, we're gonna adjust the luminance. So let's go to the midtones. Actually, let's go to the shadows first. First, the shadows, we're gonna lower the luminance because we want the shadows to be darker, not too much. The midtones, I'm gonna leave them as is because we added most of the warmth there. And then finally the highlights, we're gonna raise the highlights and make them brighter, and voila. So let's see the before. Let's scroll up here, press done. So to see the before and after of all your edits, just push and hold on the screen. So before, after, before, after. That looks so much better, so much better. I love it. I mean, that being on your phone makes your phone photography and makes your ability to edit on your phones huge. So take advantage of this tool. Learn it in Lightroom, learn it in Lightroom Mobile, and really take advantage because it will make your editing ability so much more powerful. So that wraps up this video. If you liked it, go ahead and give it a like. Comment below if you have any questions or if I missed anything, tips or tricks that you found that works really well. Otherwise, hit the subscribe button because I do videos like this every Monday at 7 p.m. I'd love to have you along on this journey that is exploring photography. With that, I will say adieu, and I will see you guys next week. All right.
Oh, the funny bone. Aye.
Ouch. Oh, and I hit it so good too. Okay. Feeling coming back into arm now. Wow.